Andrea VENTSEL will give a tremendous contribution to this seminar because he's a specialist in a field that is of extreme interest. It is very hot, it is very timely. He's an expert about the application of semiotics to political studies and political sciences. And in particular, in the last years, together with Professor Andreas VENTSEL and another professor from University of Tartu, Marie-Louise Madison, we have embarked in a study of several very hot and very urgent political topics and phenomena, among which extremism, extreme, especially right-wing movements, and conspiracy theories. So, Professor VENTSEL has many publications, articles, projects, a very extensive curriculum about this topic, and I'm very, very pleased to welcome him. As always, I encourage you to listen to him in religious silence for several reasons. First of all, because we are recording, thanks to Dr. Federico Biggio. And so the recording will be available to you because it is part of your courses program. So you're going to be also examined, tested, you're going to be asked questions about this lecture. So please pay attention. Please pay attention in silence because we are recording. And please also welcome Professor Andreas VENTSEL with a very short applause. So today, Professor VENTSEL, and I also thank Professor Bruno Serraccia for the hospitality in the course, is going to present a lecture on the topic, who is the actor? And I look forward to hearing what he's going to be saying to us. Thank you, Andreas.
Thank you very much, Massimo. And it's very nice to be here. I don't know, already 4 or 5 times. So, and all it's thanks to Massimo Leone. So, if I speak too slowly or too fast, just interrupt me and I will repeat it. If something stays unclear, also you may interrupt it. It's not a problem for me. So, like Massimo already told, the topic is who is the actor? But who is the actor in the context of social media and in the context of information warfare, which my main topics at the moment. I collaborated also with a student, the French Army, and we analyzed different kind of strategical narratives in the context of relation between NATO allies and Russia. So that's why I choose this topic, because anonymity, which is a very important case when someone starts and wants to manipulate the audience. What is the problem situation? Let's start with problem situation. Problem situation that contemporary conflicts mainly played out in the context of social media. It's not so much anymore about war to achieve some kind of territory and so on, but it's more about meaning making and interaction, and how we can direct this kind of interaction towards the aims that someone will desire. But there are also possibly difficulties arise in this context because there are big problems how to define and research intentionality of these kind of manipulative actions. Because in social media, which we can describe as symmetrical communication, I just share the same view, which maybe overlaps, okay, with the aims of a strategical narrator. But so what? Maybe we can ask. In case of mass media, it was much more controlled because it was one direction mostly, from state authorities to audience. But nowadays, audience itself part of this meaning generating process. Yeah. I may. Okay, I try. Not so like pop star. And I would like to demonstrate some techniques which concern how to hide this actor. And the second part in our lecture will concentrate my new topic, so to speak, when I try to elaborate using Umberto Eco's concept of modal reader and modal author to analyze this kind of strategical communication in the context of social media. At the moment, as already Massimo told, we are part of one big project about conspiracy narratives, and with Marilis Madison, we tried to write a book about strategical using of conspiracy narratives, which combine Eco's model of reader and model of author, which we can find, I don't know, in English there are no translation, but in Italy, in Lector in Pablo. I haven't seen in English at least.
The role of the reader.
A role of the reader, let's say it's a little bit different.
But it's not the same text.
Yeah, not the same text, but the topic is quite similar, of course. So, and also using the concept of strategical narrative, which at the moment elaborated mostly in international relation framework. So, and I hope, think that after some times you will be tired about me, then I will ask some questions. As I already asked from Massimo told that this is quite normal practice here in this auditorium. You don't have to answer, of course, but at least I can arrest a little bit. So, let's make some very basic introductional remarks about information warfare, information culture, so to speak, and social media. We may say that during the last decade, the social media become most important channel where audience get news and public information. I think this tendency quite common also in Italy. But this also have changed the nature or I don't know, nature of media culture in general, because now clicks, the retweets, shares have become some kind of criteria which allow assess the popularity of some kind of stories. And this kind of click hunting also changes how the news constructed in news media, because there are very many research have done that headlines which mirror negative content somehow are more popular and have a bigger chance to get more clicks. And clicks is what's important in media owners, because thanks to clicks we can sell different kind of advertisement. Clicks also a marker of popularity of some kind of journalist and so on. In Estonia, there was 3 weeks ago election, and far-right party, EKRE, Estonian Conservative People Party, got third position. At the moment, they start coalition agreement with other two parties. But okay, it's a bad tendency, but it's not common only for Estonia. But what was quite important that the audience or electorate of this party mainly get information on two social media, so to speak, news channel. New News, called Uued Uudised, New News, and the other is Objective. Basically, they don't believe anything which comes from, so to speak, mainstream media, from our Estonian national broadcast. And this is quite problematic because at the moment when this coalition discussion started, there was quite big protest against that this party maybe become a part of Estonian government. And they are a little bit also against the European Union and so on. Quite a classical, typical far-right party. So, we may say that the virality itself has become criterion how to measure success of some story. And that's why very many mainstream or big media corporations also share and published news that they picked up from social media, which have got there very many clicks already. In case of information overload, it's understandable because there are no time for checking is this source is true or not. In this situation, we may say that the different kind of focuser of attention have become more and more important in case of information overload. There are different kinds of institutions, but also micro celebrities, how to say, which have popularity within very specific audience, and if he or she share some kind of feeds, it's always already give some kind of credibility for this kind of news. But of course, in case of information overload and in the information fatigue, so which have now term which refer to situation where people any more able and capable to say what is true and what is false or lie. This kind of celebrities, attention focusers, also can be manipulators of audience opinion. So we may say that instead of feeling control over decision making, because nowadays we have much more information comparing with previous time, researchers of media, social media particularly, have pointed out that they are more feeling that they lost the control because there are too much information. Let's try to conceptualize it in the context of information warfare, which is our main, so to speak, topic today. There are big shift has arisen, which, according to David Kilcullen, who is wrote already 2013 the book Urban Gorilla Out of the Mountains, that there are three reasons why the concept of war is changed comparing with, I don't know, decades ago. First, conflict, war become more and more urban. It's mean conflict takes place in urban societies. Urban societies usually are also more technologically developed. Second, technology is changing the way we understand the war. In this context, we may say that war become more and more asymmetric. What I mean by that, basically that everyone, of course not everyone, it depends on skills and how smart you are. But basically, you don't need anymore the cannon to attack enemy's cannon or weapon, artillery. What you need some kind of computer device through which, if you have specific kind of knowledge, you can manipulate who is this control unit of this weapon, enemy's weapon. And this is goes to the third point. We may say that democratization of technology is empowering. Comparing with cannon, weapon, rockets, which cost a lot. Everyone basically can get a computer. So, if you have a computer, you have specific skills, some interest, of course, you can be part of information conflict and war in general. So, that's why social media and the influence of social media have become one of the main parameters why the concept of war and the information war were redefined. Because nowadays, war, not so much about to achieve some kind of territory, but it's much more about how to achieve control over the meaning-making and decision-making processes. It's much more about political and social decision processes. And it's also related with the problem of identification, which is very important when we start to talk about strategic narratives. Sorry, as I don't hear how you hear me, then is it okay or should I put more? Okay. So, that's why this kind of issue like credibility, legitimacy, perception, how to manipulate with people perception, have a precondition to achieve success in information warfare. Because much of these what make us to do some kind of decision influenced by interaction and meaning making, what we do in our social networks, which nowadays much more mediated by social media. This is the book which I recommend if you are interested on this topic. I recommend you to read, written by one Danish infowar expert, Thomas Helge Nielsen. But I quote here one nice sentence, that the public are no longer nowadays mobilized to fight wars as combatants. They are mobilized as spectators, and the character of this mobilization is the utmost consequence. That's why very many war theorists, conflict theorists, do not talk about and use the concept of war anymore, as some kind of empirical category. But it's much more about logical category. Because, for example, in case of war, it's very important when it starts, when it's over. But when, for example, Donald Trump announced, and it was 2 months ago, I suppose, that now ISIS is over, Islamic State is destroyed, does it mean that, is it so? Or maybe we can see the rise of different kind of action from these Islam states, because the concept of war and concept of terrorism not the synonyms in this case, and how terrorism action take place, it's not as similar as it was in case of traditional war. Not the same also in case of Crimea in Ukraine. So let's now introduce some techniques how we can manipulate with public opinion. One of these, information war, it's quite similar with above mentioned information fatigue, but information fatigue is the result of information war. Information war means that strategically some communication part start to share different kind, very often very contradictory news, and of course lies, conspiracy theories, and so on, so on, so on. The reason is why they do this is to make, under this kind of overview, of information overview, decision-making process much problematic. Now, for example, there are many research have done in case of Catalan independence referendum that the Russian state-sponsored TV channel like Sputnik, Russian Today, have disseminated, shared news which was pro and contra Catalan referendums. It's okay, but the nature of these news was to polarize society, because style, the essence, content of these news pro or against Catalan's independence was very emotionally loaded, and it makes within Spain itself the atmosphere about this issue very hot. And as you see, remember, there was many protests and police behaved maybe not very politely, and so on. Yeah. Saara Jaltunen, Finnish information warfare expert, have written that she wanted to make a differentiation between Western propaganda or strategical communication and Russian. If in Western state propaganda or state strategical communication try to achieve some kind of unity within audience, in case of Russian propaganda, it's counter-country. They want to break this unity. And of course, there are reasons why they do this and why these kind of techniques can be successful. At least from my opinion, of course, I have lived under Soviet Union, and there are some kind of maybe similarities about the censorship in Russia today. But public opinion have still influence to government in Western societies. If this communication between public opinion and government which make political decision is broad in society where this should be at least have had influence, then in Russia there are no this kind of links. Public opinion do not have so much influence what kind of decision making will do from government side. That's why this kind of audience segmentation, fragmentation is only successful in case of where this public opinion and unity of public opinion have some kind of important aspect. So let's try to point out some techniques how this kind of information work can be achieved. For example, flooding social network with the content which similar. Thanks to this, we can amplify this positive or negative opinion about one or other topics. Especially, it's important or very common that, and it's maybe also bring some kind of success if this kind of content have shared in different languages. It shows that not only Estonians, for example, share the same attitude, but also, I don't know, Italians, blah, 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 other. So, but it can be done using botnets, so to speak, which share automatically using algorithms, different kind of this quite similar content. Now, for example, in case of Syria, it was in 2012 when this war, civil war started. There was during 3 months, I suppose, where 4 million red weeds was discovered, which was disseminated and shared by this kind of algorithmic programs. And only then Twitter shut down this kind of accounts. The next possibility, so to speak, sock puppets. One person can direct different kind of false identities. In Estonia, just before these elections, which took part in the beginning of March, there was big scandal. One member of this EKRE party, Estonian Conservative Populist Party or Popular Party, published different articles also in mainstream media under false name. And of course, when it was discovered, it was a big problem that why you do this, and yeah. But as you know, as I already told, the audience or electorate of this party mainly believe what they get from their own social media news channels, objective and new news. So, also creating false geolocation, which also can give credibility. It's very important in case, for example, America election in America 2016. There are also very many botnets and these kind of sock puppets worked in America. So, but maybe you have other techniques in your mind, what you want to share with me. And after that, we go further with strategic narratives, which are our main, so to speak, topic today. Can you add some kind of strategy how we can manipulate in the context of social media with public opinion. How amplifying some opinions, direct, and so on. Do you have any idea? Yeah, please.
But the disinformation, okay, we live in a democratic country, right? Like America, etc., etc. Democratic countries are more successful to disinformation rather than Russia or other countries. But isn't it an act of war-like thing to do this kind of disinformation, puppetry, etc., etc.?
You mean that do Americans and other Western countries also do this kind of strategy?
Yeah, like,
of course they do. It's not of course, I don't want to say that also only Russia do or other this kind of autocratic states. No. Why I pointed out to Russia, not because I want to make propaganda, because I at the moment research exactly this kind of direction information flow. Our next project, which got some foundation from Estonian Defense Ministry, also concentrate on NATO strategic narratives. We try to explore what kind of role plays strategic narrative in the context of security dilemma. Security dilemma, you know, is the framework where someone step to increase military power, interpreted from other side as threat. This threat caused that now I will increase my military power. And this maybe goes, I don't know how. It's called also võidurelvast, victory weapon, how it's called. It was in the case of Cold War, American Soviet Union escalation of weaponization or something like that. Yes, and international relations in the framework on international relations, they try to explain this kind of strategic narrative in a security dilemma. But what I pointed here, that the strategy itself, techniques itself, a little bit different. What we do against Russia and what Russia do against us. Why? Because the audience itself and the influence of public opinion and different. Comparing in, I may say, and it's not a propaganda, Russia do not have any pre-elections. You have. And if there are no pre-election, there are public opinion do not play so important role. That's why fragmentation of public opinion is very important. If you can fragmentate, then you can start to polarize some part of this audience. Please.
I was wondering, as a third sub, I know that in countries like Estonia, Lithuania, Finland, there is this, like, rational, I don't know if it's a rational fear towards Russia and what's happening, also after what Russia has done in Ukraine. I was wondering, 2 days ago I was on YouTube and I was seeing this Russian media that was talking about this matter. They call it like many countries that were the ex-communist world, like,
post-Soviet countries. Yeah.
They have this they call it Russophobia.
I bring about Russophobia exactly the examples from Russophobia. So I will explain this term very closely. But when I start to talk about, yeah, please.
I was wondering, as a third subject, I feel like far from the world of like how do people live in Lithuania, Estonia, and how do people live in Russia. So I don't know if it's true that there is this Russophobia or it's a rational fear that the people of the North feel towards a power like Russia. I just
there are definitely some pieces of Russophobia exist, but it's not. I will explain a little bit further later, because exactly about Russophobia I want to start to talk to show how strategic narrative about Russophobia can be used and what kind of semiotical aspect you have to take account if you try to build up this kind of strategic narratives. So is it okay when I leave it later after, I don't know, 10 minutes? So, okay, let's go further, because how much time we have? At the moment there are 9:45.
Yeah, well, we still have like 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And
40 minutes, okay.
Stop for questions.
Okay, I will. Okay, great. Because maybe really the discussion is more fruitful.
And let's see if there are many questions.
Yeah, strategic narrative. I try to do very briefly. This guy is Alistair Miskimon. At the moment he works in Belfast University, and he is the main figure, so to speak, who elaborate this strategic narrative in the field of international relations. But we have to take account that the term itself was elaborated in 2006 by Lawrence Friedman, who conceptualized it in the context of military action. Now, for example, how to legitimize some kind of military action. It was 2003, or when USA invaded Iraq. What was the main strategic narrative? Exactly. And exactly on this context, we try to conceptualize. But nowadays, this concept is used much more broader. Not anymore in military field, not anymore only in international relations, but also in semiotics field, for example, but also in conflict studies and so on, because strategical narrative, strategical communication is a very important role also in marketing, for example. And elaborating some specific narrative, you can also undermine success of other company, for example. What this strategic narrative means? Alistair Miskimon, by the way, Massimo told and mentioned the name of Marilis, what's my co-author of this book. She will go to postdoc study to Alistair. So, and Alistair was very excited when she introduced her plan about how to use semiotics in research strategic narratives. So, hopefully this cooperation will be very good. I don't want to name or describe a component of a narrative. Let's ask what makes narrative strategic narrative. Strategical means that this narrative have special aim, very concrete aim, and it should be somehow related with intentionality. Someone behind these aims. Alistair Miskimon called it actor of strategic narrative. The main aim, not main aim, yeah, there are different kind of aims can be, but to achieving this kind of aims through strategic narrative, you have to create some links between audience memory and the issue of the aim. Now, for example, usually strategical narratives, as narratives in general, talk about conflict. There always should be some kind of conflict. In strategical narrative, in case of information war, where usually these conflicts are, are quite important or publicly important. But like in fictional narrative, the conflict should be there. Otherwise, there are no basic categories, antagonist and protagonist. So, strategic narrative usually established to achieving these goals, what the actor want and desire, established the identity of actors, whom audience, member of audience can be identified. There should be always links that I also share these aims, which was elaborated or shared by this actor of strategical narrative. Desired destination, what we want to achieve, and of course obstacles. To overcoming these obstacles, we achieve our goals. One of the primary functions of strategic narrative is to offer, and then quote here to Thomas Elker Nissen, to offer a framework through which conflicts past, present, and future can be structured. It means that this conflict, which posed in the strategic narrative, also should be related with other events in past. It's not some kind of isolated. Otherwise, it's if you try to establish the strategic narrative around one very isolated event, the audience, you can't be successful in audience. Thanks to this past, present, and future, this audience will be agree with the strategic narrative aims or not. So that's why actors or shaper of strategic narratives should always take account memory aspect of audience, targeted audience. It's contain not only important aspect of from identity side, but also what kind of stylistic markers this audience may use. What kind of semiotic modeling system is prevalent in this targeted audience, within this targeted audience? If I don't use social media, for example Facebook, but I use Instagram, then of course my strategic narrative should take account this. And much more maybe visually oriented messages have to be disseminated. Ms. Kimmon, talking about how to analyze strategic narratives, separate 3 levels. Formation, usually it's about how actor of strategic narratives or shaper of the strategic narrative create the first phase of this strategic narrative. Projection, how it shared, contested in media, in our case in social media, by others, members of social media and spokespersons, and also reception level, which means what kind of impact this strategic narrative have to change the attitude, but not only attitude, but also behavior of concrete targeted audience. strategical narrative always want to achieve some kind of change, not only in mind, but also in political decision-making processes. I go to election and will elect this way, like it was desired by designer of the strategical narrative. But in case of social media, we may say that the problem is, like I already told, that how to detect intentionality of this actor of strategical narratives, who behind this kind of over information, and how to analyze targeting the audience. If we go back a little to a level of formation, okay, we can imagine that you can go and ask from state authorities, but what you mean, why you do this kind of strategic analysis? But is it really meaningful action from your side? Because they do not tell you anything. Because if strategic narrative you want to somehow manipulate public opinion, of course, your main aim should be somehow hidden. That's why, like Sara Jantunen has told, the difficulty of attribution has been inscribed in the asymmetric means of influence. You never know. Now, in case of mass media, it was quite obvious. It was controlled, at least somehow. In case of, for example, Soviet Union, I have lucky to live also under this condition, totalitarian censorship. In public discourse, there was no chance that some counter-argument against some state statements publicly was published, so to speak. But in case of social media, it's much more difficult because we may say that differently from a fictional narrative, which in a simple example is book. The narrative is there. You open the book, okay, let's read. But in case of strategic narrative and in case of social media, the pieces of this kind of narratives you can find in mainstream media, but also different kind of blogs in social media. Sometimes, as I already told you, and brought the example about Catalans and Russian Today and the Sputnik information war against Catalans, that one channel can, and even one media text can contain different and contradictory narratives. So it's very hard to explore it. And of course, according to Foucault, discursive power is successful if it stays anonymous. Let's go further with ECHO. As we know, ECHO tried to create the framework how to analyze in creating of interpretational paths of readers. and he posed that the interpretational aspect has to be part of each generation mechanism. To generate the text means to trigger a strategy of component of which is foreseeing the other party, audience, reader, moves. It means for ECHO, a recipient, a receiver always in text is always operator. he talked about said and unsaid places. Unsaid said is something which is common sense, to say, so to speak. But unsaid refer to these points which reader should himself or herself feel. The unsaid may consist cultural, as I already told, cultural common sense, but also, for example, known only for very specific and small target. As Massimo already told, that Mari-Liis and I have dealt and researched Estonian extreme right social media communication. Massimo was opponent of Mari-Liis' PhD work. And there we discovered several this kind of numeric codes, secret words, slogans, sentences from some specific songs, which all refer to some kind of special ideological worldview. So, for example, 88. What mean 88? Number. Is it in case of far right movement?
SS.
No SS. Sieg Heil. 40. Maybe it's a little bit. Not Sieg Heil. Heil Hitler. Sorry, Heil Hitler. Ha mean alphabetical numeration. Sorry. 14. I saw when I was in Georgia.
It's HH, so high.
Yeah, exactly. HH. Yeah. Heil Hitler. 14. I saw this kind of number in Georgia, by the way. When I go in metro and some kind of Georgian alphabetical sentences or what I don't understand anything, but they use the same numbers, 14. And then I ask what this 14 means and what this Georgian language message tell me. And there was quite much about nationalistic points. It means, and it's you can check it, for example, from Wikipedia. We must secure the existence and of our people and the future of white children. Means this, and of course, this, if you use this word number, it's exactly referred to this kind of fascistic, nationalistic community. If you don't know this, like I didn't know anything about this Georgian case, I don't understand what it means. But if you know this kind of numeration, you are much more successful to understand what it means. Okay, what is important here, that from the point of view for Warmer or creator of the strategic narrative, this kind of unsaid self-pragmatic codes, they target audience, but also optimization of communication. If you put, and Eco used there in this in lecture in Fabula, Peirce infinitive semiosis concept, that if you start to explain and define each word by other words, there are no stop anymore, no end. So, especially in case of social media, where we live under a condition of information overview, text should also be short. So, let's go further. How now model of reader comes to form? Echo proposed that each author of narrative build the model of author, which share quite similar codes, and through these codes, if the real empirical reader able to activate these codes, the narrative open in this way as it was desired by the authors. But what is important here, the competence of model reader, not similar or synonymous, of course, with audience memory. And in case of strategical narrative and strategical communication, one of the aims to create, of course, this model reader, but through this model reader, create interpretative communities. Because, for example, the audience have different, as I have written here, fragmentary bits of memory. If the strategic and narrative somehow unite these memory bits in coherent, united way, it's also start to create interpretative communities memory, through which next time the audience will decode these codes which is put in by sender of strategic narratives in a way as a designer of a strategic narrative want to. So it's very important that this model reader is a means how to shape interpretative communities. Again, we may refer here to Russian Today, how they start to create this kind of interpretative communities, become popular. They start to submit different kind of narratives, conspiracy theories, and so on, so on, and so on. What was the main uniting angle in this kind of communication? That they all share something that they was opposite to mainstream understanding, creating in this way this interpretative community, which is very suspicious against anything which comes from mainstream media, media corporation, big media corporation. Then, only after then, you can start to simulate your own strategic agenda. Because this strategic agenda not simulated so much in mainstream media. But if I already have suspicion against strategic agenda, mainstream media, then it's much more easier to achieve these kind of goals. So, what is also important, that the model author, the other term, which elaborated by Umberto Eco, helped to also us to shed light to real author, so to speak. How? Usually, as I already told, the author of strategic narrative hidden, and but we can describe the strategical author or author of strategic narrative exploring the constructed say, speak persons' perspectives. For example, there are very many cases this kind of strategic narrative is supported not by, for example, state authorities, but exactly about expert scientists who somehow support this strategic narrative. Because if you, for example, if you open the Russian Today or Sputnik, you can see that they very often refer to, for example, popular politician, former original minister, a well-known political analyst from British, famous German economist, and so on, so on, so on. They want to give authority to some sources. And thanks to this kind of authority, maybe this narrative also seems more trustable, so to speak. Okay, let's go then to strategical narrative about Russophobia. Why bring Russophobia? First, I already told that it somehow overwhelmed my, at the moment, research topic. But the Russophobic narrative is it's not only how to say some kind of propaganda narrative because it got very long roots in cultural history. First, it was named by Tютchev, 1867, who was also a poet, but also administrator, some kind of administrator in Russian socialist government. What it was important here that he was very much pro pan-Slavic movement. But Russophobia closely related to his real existing fear against Russia and all what comes from Russia. The problem usually because we are very different political system. Especially after French Revolution and so on, Peter the Great wanted to establish this kind of European model of government. But I don't know how successful it was, but usually the fear against Russia related to these government differences, and also that there are big cultural differences, which based already in a juridical system, which differ from Roman legal system and this Russian system, legal system. So, what I want to say that Russophobia, not something which always have been some kind of propaganda means. No. It is a real threat. I'm quite sure that Russians also feel some kind of strange or threat against Western society, because it's a little, not a little, but quite different still. And these kind of differences also bring some kind of fear. Let's go further. What I want to now say and exemplify how it can be used as strategic narrative for achieving some specific goal. what should strategical narrator or who create strategical narrative take account? Of course, basic dictionary. In case of Russophobia, we may say that there are some kind of shift started after 2000, I suppose. First, it was really mainly related with pro-Kremlin politics. Nowadays, they want to show that this Russophobia not so strictly related with politics of Russian government, but all attitude towards Russian Eastern culture. Why it's, we may ask you why it's important. Of course it's important. We may always criticize from Western point of view political opponents. But if you start to criticize cultural peculiarities, it's something which not so much accepted within auditorium. And if Russian propaganda strategic narrative is successful, then all this kind of connotation can be also transferred to Russian politics. It means that we can legitimize our political action through this, that this is Russophobic, but not because of politics, but that Western politicians are Russophobic and against Russian culture. And of course, as I already told, choosing the term is very important in political study. What kind of semantic field and what kind of words now, if this re-categorizing of Russophobia is successful, it brings other relation with other groups. Russophobia. It's not anymore related very closely and tightly with political aspect, but cultural codes. What here, it's a Russian language dictionary. It was published under Stalinist regime, and it was the first time when Russophobia as a word was mentioned in dictionary. The great example of totalitarian language. Nina Kupina, sorry. Great scholar from, I hope I don't mistake, from Yekaterinburg University, linguist, sociolinguist, have done several books about totalitarian language. And using especially this one case or example, how, for example, different kind of words related with political contents. Even, no, for example, people who don't have skill to literature, non-literature, how it's illiterate, was exemplified in political essence, who do not have a right opinion, whatever. Usually it's something which related with very specifically my skills with writings. But now these writings should be always political lauded. It was explained in this book, dictionary, with political, ideological point of view. And this is one of the example how totalitarian language, in case of totalitarian language, political field, in this context, communist ideology subordinate all semantic fields. I don't know, maybe it also released in her books also in English, but I have read several in Russian and really recommend if you are interested in totalitarian language. I know that there are also something I've done in case of the German, Nazi German, but as the communist regime, especially Stalin regime, continued much more longer period, it's a, I think, better example. Rhetorical and statistical encoding. If you want to be successful, creating this kind of interpretative communities and achieve with this strategical narrative your aims, what you want to achieve, then you have to take account different kind of stylistic peculiarities which proper to this kind of targeted audience, metaphors that they used, and so on. For example, in case of Russophobia, Estonians and other Baltic states, post-Soviet states, have described as some kind of puppets, marionettes, without no free will. Belong to be in NATO or European Union, we all know free choice. This is the main, and that they use different kind of metaphor describing this kind of relation. Why it's so? And that's why they try to explain this kind of Russophobic attitudes against Russia within Estonian or Baltic states and post-Soviet area. I have to admit that there are, because of historical reason, and maybe there are some parties which amplifying this fear against Russia and so on. It's always political matter also. So it's not good, but it is so. Why it's so? First, because of peculiarities of audience, we belong to the same area. We have still quite similar, how to say, at least in one sentence or one part of audience, quite similar strategy or models how to create enemies. For example, Mihhail Lotman, the son of Yuri Lotman, have written several articles about conspiracy theories. And he pointed out that be it Estonian fascist, Chechen terrorist, or whatever, they somehow share the same attribution, same properties, because the cultural model depicting of enemy may be changed in content, but not changed in the form. Inferences of ordinary scenarios. In case of Russophobia, it's referred to understanding that Russia surrounded by enemies. And this trigger the scenario of war. For war, we all know what war means. If we use this kind of war scenario, establishing our strategic narratives, we can construct a very specific kind of strategic narratives, which stress battle, fight, mobilization, so on, so on, so on. And of course, the situation between Western and Russian, it's not very good at the moment. That's why it's quite popular scenario. Inference to intertextual scenarios. It's more narrow, culturally more oriented. In case of Russophobia, there are very big overlapping with passion story. which have very deep roots in, for example, Russian cultural memory. They both stress humiliated nation. We start to how to say, rising from its knees. Why humiliation in nowadays? It's because of Russia feel that they lost Cold War. And this metaphor, this scenario, reference to this kind of intertextuality public scenarios that now we have salvation because one new leader helped to us to arise from knees, is very similar with salvation story and passion story. So if you can use, strategical narrator can use this kind of inferences to intertextual scenarios, it can be more successful. What is important then, in case of social media, it's important that the audience itself start to create new narratives which support the same main narratives. If it use the same intertextual scenarios, it can be related with your agenda. And last one, ideological hypercoding. Of course, ECO offer much more different kind of possibilities, but in this context, I think it's enough. And nowadays, they want to show that Russophobia is the same bad thing as anti-Semitism. I picked this picture from Off Guardian. Off Guardian is one of propaganda site where there was a description that now the Guardian, the real Guardian, start to describe Russian the same way as it was in case of Goebbels, because it's this is from a Nazi posters, and this of course Mr. Putin. I tried to find this Guardian where this picture should published, but I didn't find. Why it's important? If this kind of links between Russophobia and anti-Semitic will be succeeded in audience understanding of Russophobia, then of course anti-Semitic attitude is something which absolutely negative in at least in Western countries. If this kind of connotation goes also transferred to concept of Russophobia, it helped to achieve and legitimize codes what we wanted to achieve with other strategic narratives. If you accuse someone, you are Russophobic, you have the same connotation with like anti-Semitic, then of course audience do not take account seriously or be very negatively against this kind of accusations. So, algorithm effect, if we can use it, then these 10 minutes, okay?
Yeah,
Yeah,
5 minutes.
Okay. They start to function as anchoring points or semantic triggers. There are two terms which quite overlap with this meaning, but I mention here both because they are elaborated by different authors. Anchoring effect, if you use, for example, I don't know, some kind of picture with Russophobic and anti-Semitic connotations, they start to grab attention first, and start to activate interpretation paths in the way that author of strategic narrative may desire. Like Barth have pointed out that interpreter finds one dominant which determines particular connotation. In case of information overload in social media, it's particularly important. Be it allusion, clues, markers, heuristic markers, and so on. It depends on what kind of semiotic style you use. They encourage filling in the gaps in the story world. Feel unsaid, as I pointed out when I started with Umberto Eco. So, just very briefly, what is the, so to speak, strategy of transmedia or social media storytelling? Push author of strategic narrative push the same content with minor differences or different kind of platforms. To bring extra content. What is important in our case, it's very important if strategic narratives is successful, other user of social media start to create user-generated content with scales. They start themselves create quite similar stories, quite similar aims, even if they don't want to deliberately do it. But they are somehow, the interpretative community already generates itself this kind of actions. So, conclusion for the reader points at the segment of understanding of author's understanding of segment of the audience, which the author has addressed the message. It's helped to generate through modal reader this interpretative community, which start itself generate the same or similar narratives, which deserved the aims which desired by the author of narrative. It's very hard to say that, yeah, it's not intentional. Of course it's not intentional, but it doesn't matter. The aim stays the same. They share the same aim. If this action, which was achieved by strategical narrative, by author of strategic narrative, is achieved, then it's how to say? It's the best proof that this strategical influencing was successful. Audience itself start to disseminate the quite similar narratives which serve the aims of the real actor. Because what I want to say using this modal author and modal reader concepts by Eco, that what is important, the unity of aim make the narrative strategic, not the unity of author, that I can, I don't know, find the real author who start first time to push the button. It's not important anymore because the aim, strategical aim is important. Of course, I don't want to say that discovering or finding the real author is not important at all. So for example, In case of American election in 2016, of course, if you want to take someone for responsibility, that they should be responsible for this kind of action, I think we don't look at these people who share the same narrative which was constructed in this kind of building. This building is St. Petersburg Internet Research Agency, the famous troll factory, where most of, and it's not a propaganda, it's everyone know, even Russians know. That it's not important. In this case, it's important that we have to accuse someone, political actor, behind this kind of influencing the American elections, 2016. Yeah, but for that, we need combine our methods with other methods, algorithmical analysis, where we can depict very well where, what direction this kind of flow of information starts. But our purpose using this kind of model for analyzing social media strategic narrative communication is qualitative. Qualitative analysis, and it's helped to explain how the social media threats of American users were saturated by conflicts or with conflicts and strategically influenced in a way that people started spreading narratives that possibly overlapped with Russian strategical narrative. This is what we can achieve using this kind of methods. Not go back who first put the button. So, thank you very much, and sorry that I wasted all your time.